Arrow, how's it going?
Doing very well, Mike. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm dandy. Weather up in New Jersey is a little on the cold side for me, but all things considered, not too bad.
Absolutely, because you know how the East Coast is. It's suddenly when it becomes summer, we all get trapped in this gigantic bubble of nothing but, oh my God, can we get out of this, please?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
To be a part of NBC's Mr. Mayor, you know that people are going to be watching this show 50 years from now. That's the quality of this show.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, to be on that set, do you feel it, or it can't be just another job?
To keep yourself sane day to day, you kind of have to tell yourself it's another job. But if I do take a step back outside of myself and I have an out of body experience, it's like, yeah, it is surreal to be standing next to, award winners Ted Danson and Holly Hunter, and to be working for Tina Fey and Robert Carlock. But if I fangirled out like that every day, I'd go crazy. So every day I try and go in just telling myself it's another day at work.
I've always loved Holly Hunter, and the reason why is because she's been authentic with that Southern accent. That's part of her signature, and being here in the South, I mean, that's very valuable to us.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we first started, there were talks of maybe getting a dialect coach, try and help her work that out. But she kind of just stuck with it, and I admire her for that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, part of the comedy of Mr. Mayor is seeing her stand next to Ted Danson. I mean, to me, that's very funny.
Oh, you and our director of photography. It's one of his favorite jokes. Just if they're standing far apart in a group scene, he'll ask them to stand next to each other because it's instant comedy.
Well, everybody on the show has their own role, and that's what I love about this show is that we sit there and we follow everybody's storyline. How is it that Tina Fey and Robert Carlock can do that to where we fall in love with each and every layer of this show?
I think that is just years and years of experience. I came up watching 30 Rock and Kimmy Schmidt and just loving those shows. And to be able to work with them, this is not me sucking up to my bosses. I love those shows. And so to be able to work with them is an absolute dream. And I think it's that pedigree. They both also came from the Second City SNL world. And so when you've been doing comedy that long, you kind of learn how to balance that many characters over time.
Does it follow the old rule of keep it simple, stupid? Because I for some reason I always hit repeat. I want to watch it again, and that's what we do with music. We don't do that necessarily with TV shows.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's, I think the answer is a little bit yes and no. I think that their writing style, like you said, it's so fast paced that you kind of have to rewatch it to catch all the jokes.
That's it.
But then when you listen to those individual jokes, it's like, wow, that is a very stupid, funny joke.
The words that you bring forward, do you read them during right away, or do you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to let this play out, and I'm going to get a natural reaction and live off that energy?
They're very meticulous with their words,
Oh.
and so we do the table reads, and most of the time we stick to things as scripted. In comedy, we all like to improvise. I have a background in improv. Obviously, Bobby Moynihan does too.
Yeah.
But usually, you're improvising to sort of improve upon a script, and it's hard to improve upon perfection. They craft their jokes so expertly that they kind of just stick to what they are all the way through to the shoot.
So when you're working with Bobby Moynihan, do you sit there and think of Saturday Night Live and go, "You're that dude. I remember that. Oh my God, that sketch you did," and or is it he's just one of us? He's just a guy.
Yeah, it's sort of what I was saying earlier about Ted and Holly. It's a little bit of both. When we're out in public, people will come up and go, "Hey, drunk uncle," and it's like that's one thing. Yes, we all know about that. But then, if I'm trying to be calm about myself and I go into work, and that's just my coworker Bobby.
To play a chief strategist, I mean, do you have to do some homework and to study what they do, because you make it real, you make it relatable, you make it funny.
Thank you. Part of the homework that I did when I first got the role was looking at what a chief strategist does. And one of the things I found out is that the chief strategist is primarily a campaign role, meaning once a politician's elected, they move on to the next politician. And so to me, it's almost a little bit of a joke that this mayor is so inept that he kept his chief strategist on even after he got hired for the job. And then once I got that joke, then I kind of just went, oh, okay, now I have free reign to kind of do whatever I want, because most installed politicians don't have a chief strategist.
What's so great about Mr. Mayor on NBC is that when we watch it, we sit there and say, oh, that's exactly what happens in our mayor's office too. It has to, because everybody's got a dork side, and that's what we love about this show.
Yeah, we're not aiming for that. And I think it's interesting when, we hear from people who work in local politics all over the country, and they say that. And I think that just speaks to the universality of television. We're just trying to tell these very human stories about kind of idiots in an office, and that's something that I think everyone can relate to. And I think that that's sort of the magic about our show is we're not trying to be political, we're just trying to be human about it, and I think that's much more relatable to many more people.
So to be a part of a brand new season, I mean, here it comes. We have to wait each. The great thing is that we have to wait for each episode. This isn't, you're not giving us 10 episodes at a time. And part of the flavor of this new age is that we have to wait for next week. Is it like a follow-up album for you every single week where all of a sudden it's like, okay, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, there it goes?
Yeah, and you know what's funny is I think musicians have the benefit of being able to hear their album before it's released to the public, and I don't even get to see the final edit before it airs. So every week I'm like, oh, please be good, and then it comes out good, and I'm like, yes, another bullet dodged, you know.
we got to talk about what you do away from television, and it's called Story Pirates. This right here, dude, is such a brilliant idea, and to me, you're shaping the future of writers, actors, and as well as producers and directors.
Yeah, I hope so. It's something that I do that feels like I'm putting something back out into the universe in a positive way, definitely.
Where'd the idea come from? Was it just one day you were sitting around looking at little adults going, well, I do have some knowledge here. I think I should start putting it out there.
Oh gosh, no. Story Parts actually started way before me. The
Really?
organization's been around for I want to say 10 or 15 years. I should know that off the top of my head, but it's sort of grown into this giant children's media organization. We put out, it started out with just live shows. We'd go into schools, teach kids the fundamentals of how to write a story, and then take those stories and turn them into stage shows. But now we've grown into podcasts and books and albums and bigger live shows, and it's a great organization to be a part of. But the pedigree of people who have been story pirates is so large. There's so many like people from Saturday Night Live who have been story pirates, and other celebrities that you've seen. And so when I was a comedian in New York, I heard about it and fell in love with the organization, and I started doing it, and I've never looked back.
So did you run into the same thing that I did? Because I would go into these schools to teach them to write the stories and stuff, but then I would always run into the teacher that said they need to learn how to read first. And my argument was, no, teach them to write and they will read.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. I don't think we meet with too much resistance from teachers. I think they're mostly grateful that someone else is taking the kids off their hands for an hour or two.
So true.
But yeah, I think that it's less a focus on hard writing skills and more of a focus on using your imagination. And I think that's that kind of goes beyond like how to construct a sentence. We have a lot of kids who don't feel comfortable telling stories that way, so we'll encourage them to draw a picture and just tell us what's happening. And then we'll use those stories as well, So really, just we try and take a more bespoke approach to the kids.
So then, how do you train the young adult or the kids how to trust in improv and to be able to ad lib in ways where it's like, okay, you can say it. You may not want to write it, but just say it and get it out because there's something in there.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that we say is that you have permission to get weird, and I think once you kind of push kids out of their comfort zone, and a lot of kids also take to the comfort zone of like regurgitating what they're already seeing. So if we ask them to name a character, they'll say Iron Man. It's like, that's great, that's a character I've seen before though, so what's the character that's from your imagination? Once you kind of give permission to go wild, I in all the years I've been doing it, I've never once not been surprised by the results.
That in itself could be a sitcom. You going into these schools to work one-on-one with these kids.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I will say, if we're looking for a school sitcom, Abbott Elementary is blowing me away. And I'm not even associated with the show, but it's just, as a fan of television, one of my favorite shows on TV right now.
You're so right about, well, first of all, I think people like Tina Fey and Robert Carlock are helping to unlock that door where we have more realism through the art of acting and sharing real comedy instead of doing the reality TV thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I certainly hope so, yeah.
Well, even your own experiences. I mean, to go from New Amsterdam, you worked on Luke Cage. My God, dude, your resume is like, okay, here I am. Okay, but I still haven't reached that point yet where I am. So when do you get to that point where you go, I am?
Oh gosh, I don't think I'll ever get to that point.
Really?
It feels like the top of the mountain. I think that for a lot of my life, you said, what's the goal? I would have said to be a series regular on a primetime network sitcom. And now I'm here. And I still don't feel like I am. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's a brass ring I'll just be reaching for the rest of my life.
So now, when you put together a new, I mean, a sitcom like Mr. Mayor on NBC, we all know that there has to be commercials and stuff like that. So the average show is 21 minutes, but it takes longer than 21 minutes for you guys to put this thing together. I've never been on the set of a TV sitcom because I keep being too late to get in line.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it averages out to about a week an episode. The old adage in Hollywood is it takes a day to make a minute. And it's a lot of work that goes into comedy. So I hope that people like it.
A day to make a minute, man. You know I'm going to have to write about that. A day to make a minute. Oh my God, that right there in itself is like several pages of writing.
Yeah, no, I think it applies more to movies. A 100-minute movie, it takes about 100 days to at least to do the production. And, then nowadays with CGI, I'm sure post-production doubles that time. So, it could be more, it could be less, but that's the rule of thumb I adhere to.
As a writer and as that person on a live stage, when you take the words of Tina Fey and Robert Carlock, what is it like for you to turn that into, because you can't let them be them, you still have to bring yourself to the to that camera.
Right. Yeah. It's intimidating. It's challenging. And just the way that anyone in any profession relishes a good professional challenge. It's a lot of fun. They have a very specific cadence and style.
Yep.
And I remember when I was doing the audition, the casting director at first was like, okay, that's great. Can you do it faster? And then that happened 3 or 4 times where I just kept pitching it up and up. And then I had to remind myself, oh, right, that was the pace of 30 Rock. If you go back and you watch 30 Rock, there's 100 jokes in a minute and they all have to land for someone. And so I think that's sort of the fun challenge about working for them is they write these very blink and you'll miss them kind of jokes, and to be able to make each one of those funny every time is a real fun challenge.
Oh my God, because it was because of 30 Rock that I created this thing. I call it the underbreath. In other words, it's that person in the background that says something that you really weren't supposed to hear, but then when it goes by, you go, did I just hear that right? Because it's one of those that catches you a little bit later on.
Yeah, exactly. And even, 30 Rock and Kimmy Schmidt both got to the point where it wasn't even spoken jokes. It was like you could read a sign on the door in the background and it would be this its own complicated joke, and you'd be like, I can't believe that people are putting time and money and thought into that, and I'm so glad to be a part of that sort of cinematic universe.
Well, it's because they have retrained the viewer in the way that you can't watch this TV show while cooking dinner, because you've got to be in front of that screen to see everything that's taking place.
Yeah. I think that there's a little bit of magic to that. But it also works the other way. You know what I mean? Like if you had to be cooking dinner, you would still hear enough jokes that you would understand what's happening. You just get a little bit more out of it when you, obsessively pause and take screenshots and share those online.
Has that changed you any on a live stage in the way that you deliver your stories?
I don't think so, because I think that stage is its own medium, the same way that, you pivot a little bit when you're writing, you pivot a little bit when you're, singing or whatever. I think that the stage demands a certain pace of performance, a certain cadence, a certain rhythm, so that the live audience can connect with you. And so I try not to cross-contaminate the two. I try not to get too comfortable in one medium when I'm switching to the other.
Well, with your style and stuff like that, I was listening to an interview yesterday with Gilbert Gottfried, and he said that right in the middle of something, he would throw out a line that he was thinking about because he was trying to build a joke on the spot. Is that the way you do it as well?
My background is more in improv and sketch, and I think that Gilbert is such a brilliant stand-up comedian, but stand-up is just a form that I couldn't try if I wanted to. With improv, I try and take the philosophy of don't try and say the funny thing, which almost feels counterintuitive, but you're really trying to be truthful. You're listening to your scene partner, you're trying to build something that's truthful, and something funny will spring of that. That's sort of the magic of improv, is just trusting that the funny will come, but you try not to go for the obvious joke in improv, or at least I don't. Some people do.
Oh my God, you just brought me back to an area of over at iHeart, in the way that we had a door that separated the sales department from the radio station studios, and I remember there was a golden rule. On this side of this door, you're going to hear anything, and we are going to cross the line, because that's what we do on this side. That's what I love about improv, is that we can shoot things back and forth. We don't really injure anybody, but it's funny as hell.
Yeah. I remember listening to an interview with Tom Hanks, and he was saying earlier in his career, he would walk in and be like, all right, I'm going to watch the editing. And the director would say, no, you can't, because we're going to say things in this room we're 100% honest. We have to be truthful about what the movie needs, and we're going to hurt your feelings. We're going to say terrible things about you. And from that moment on, he learned to never watch the dailies, never watch his own work. He shoots it on camera and then he walks away.
Oh my God, that is so true, because as an editor, I'll sit here and say, well, that sucked. Oh my God, where the hell was your mind in that one? And people go, who are you talking to? I'm talking to myself. What is going on here? This cannot be here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, when you're creating sketches in a 2022 world, how do you face this thing called cancel culture in the way of going, I've got to say it. It's got to be said. It's called a freedom of speech.
I that never really crosses my mind, because I'm never trying to be offensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think that comedy is just about what makes you laugh, what's funny to you, and if the things that are funny to you are hurting other people, let me take a step back. I feel like most comedy is supposed to be punching up. You're supposed to be taking the wind out of sails of the people in power, and I think that when we talk about cancel culture, you're talking about punching down. Usually it's about a comedian trying to take the wind out of the sails of people who have less, and that to me just isn't funny. So to me, the guiding principle is more just, is it funny? And I just don't find that kind of thing funny.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because that's been the subject of like a Don Rickles and people like that, because they said that he wouldn't survive in a world today. But I love your picture of punch up, not down.
Yeah. It feels like a pretty simple concept that I think some comedians don't grasp, and that more power to them if they can make it work. But to me, it's more fun to make fun of billionaires and politicians than it is to make fun of people who can't afford housing or whatever.
So true. On NBC's Mr. Mayor, were you hired way before Ted Danson? Only because if I got a phone call saying, okay, you're going to be on the show, it has Holly Hunter and Ted Danson, I wouldn't move. I'd be in shock. It would feel like a Ted Williams grand slam.
Oh yeah, that is exactly how I felt. I liken it to imagine you're a concert pianist and someone says, "Hey, we got you a concert. Elton John's going to be the audience," and you're like, "Wait, why? That's too big, too fast." When I was auditioning, they had already hired Ted Danson and Bobby Moynihan, and they were auditioning everyone else. And so I remember by the time I got to the screen test, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this, but at the very least, I will have gotten to be in the same room as Ted Danson and Bobby Moynihan, and that's pretty cool. And now I pinch myself every day that I get to work with them.
Do you ever look at Ted Danson and try to figure out how is it this man can play so many different roles and make him iconic?
Oh my gosh, every day. There's so many mysteries about Ted Danson. How is he so spry after all these years? How is he still so handsome after all these years? How can he still do it? But then you meet him and he's the nicest guy. And I'm convinced that the secret to longevity in Hollywood is just trying to be a nice person. And I think that's what he's taught me, and that's what I'm going to try to aspire to.
That's so true, because when you go to LA and stuff like that, one of the things that I always learned is that the nicest ones are the actors. All you have to do is just treat them like a human being.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard it said, I've never met anyone top of the charts mega famous, but I've heard that if you want to be like a Tom Hanks level, or like a Sandra Bullock, someone who's just been working for 40 years and is still at the top of their game, you have to be the nicest person in the room. And I really, really believe in that. So
with your podcast skills, with your acting skills, with sketch and stuff like that, of your podcasting and stuff, who would you rather interview, Elton John or the tour manager? Who's going to give you the better story?
Oh, of course the tour manager is going to give you the better story. Elton John has a public persona that he has to maintain, and there's a time and a place for that, and that's great. But if you want juicy dirt, you got to go to that tour manager.
That's so true. That's so true. So if you could write and produce the perfect project, what would it be?
I want to do a big budget feature film centering Asian American stories. That's sort of, as an Asian American in Hollywood, I think that there's a lot that hasn't been said. We're just starting to scratch the surface with, Turning Red and Everything Everywhere All at Once and Crazy Rich Asians. Those are like the best movies that we have. And the oldest one is like, 4 or 5 years old. And so I think there's a lot of stories to tell there. And I'd love to get my hands on something like that.
Well, you just planted the seed in the universe, sir.
I hope so. If any big time movie producers are out there, I'm waiting for your call.
You got to come back to the show anytime in the future, Mike. The door is always going to be open for you.
Thank you very much. I'd love to come back. This was a lot of fun.
You be brilliant today, okay, sir?
Hey, you too, Arrow.